The rhythmic clanking of metal against metal filled Eric's auto repair shop as he worked beneath a lifted Honda Civic. 20 years of experience had taught him every sound his shop could make, from the whir of power tools to the subtle ping of cooling engines. But lately, a new sound had been catching his attention, the smooth, practiced sales pitch of his neighbor, Harry Reynolds. "Think about it, Eric," Harry's voice carried across the shop floor, perfectly timed between the pneumatic wrench bursts. "Your expertise, my connections, we could double your current income within 6 months." Eric rolled out from under the car, wiping grease from his hands with a shop rag. At 52, he'd learned to be cautious about opportunities that sounded too good to be true. But Harry had a way of making everything sound not just possible, but inevitable. "I don't know, Harry," Eric said, studying his neighbor's immaculate appearance, crisp blue suit, perfectly styled silver hair, and that confident smile that seemed to know something you didn't. "The shop's doing well enough. Why fix what isn't broken?" Harry chuckled, running his hand along the hood of a nearby Mustang. "Because, well enough is the enemy of exceptional, my friend. Look around, this place has potential, but it's stuck in the past. With my investment connections and your reputation for quality work, we could transform it into the premier luxury auto service center in the tri-state area." The idea wasn't entirely unappealing. Eric had always dreamed of expanding, maybe even opening a second location. But something held him back, probably the same something that made his wife Laura purse her lips whenever Harry's name came up at dinner. "Laura's not too sure about this whole partnership idea," Eric admitted, reaching for his coffee mug, black, 2 sugars, just like every day for the past 2 decades. Harry's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "Ah, Laura. Always looking out for you." "But Eric, sometimes the people closest to us can hold us back without meaning to. They see us as we were, not as we could be." The words hit home harder than Eric expected. Just last night, Laura had given him that look, the one that suggested she still saw him as the same struggling mechanic she'd married, not the successful business owner he'd become. "Tell you what," Harry continued, pulling out his phone. "I'm having dinner with some potential investors tomorrow night. Why don't you join us? No commitment, just conversation. Bring Laura if you'd like." Eric glanced around his shop, the familiar tools, the trusted equipment, the walls that could use a fresh coat of paint. Maybe Harry was right. Maybe well enough wasn't enough anymore. "Laura's got her book club tomorrow night," Eric said, already knowing he'd accept the invitation. "But I could stop by." Harry's smile widened. "Perfect. The Capitol Grill, 7 sharp. Where's something nice, first impressions matter in this league." As Harry left, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the concrete floor, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something big. He just wasn't sure if it was an opportunity or a precipice. That evening, when Eric told Laura about the dinner meeting, her reaction was exactly what he'd expected. "There's something off about him, Eric," she said, aggressively chopping vegetables for dinner. "He shows up out of nowhere 6 months ago, becomes your best friend, and now he wants to be your business partner. Don't you think that's a little convenient?" Eric leaned against the kitchen counter, watching his wife's precise movements with the knife. After 25 years of marriage, he knew every expression that crossed her face. Right now, it was the one that said she was holding back stronger words. "He's not my best friend, Laura. He's a neighbor with good business connections who sees potential in what I've built." The chopping stopped. Laura turned to face him, her green eyes sharp with concern. "What you've built is already beautiful, Eric. It's honest. It's real. Harry's world, it's all smoke and mirrors. Promise me you won't sign anything without having a lawyer look it over." "Of course I won't," Eric assured her, stepping forward to kiss her forehead. "I'm just going to dinner. Just listening. That's all." But as he lay in bed that night, Eric's mind raced with possibilities. He imagined a modernized shop, a fleet of luxury cars, his name becoming synonymous with high-end auto service. The dream was intoxicating, and Harry seemed to be offering the key to make it real. What Eric didn't notice was the shadow that passed by their bedroom window, Harry's figure, phone to his ear, speaking in low tones as he paced his driveway. Yes, he's in. No, the wife's suspicious, but it won't matter. Trust me, by this time next month, everything will be in place. 20 years of goodwill and customer trust, it's exactly what we need. The conversation continued, but the words were lost to the night air, carrying secrets that would soon shatter more than just dreams. The Capitol Grill buzzed with the quiet confidence of wealth, soft lighting reflecting off crystal glasses, hushed conversations about million-dollar deals, and the subtle rustle of silk ties against Egyptian cotton shirts. Eric tugged at his collar, feeling like an imposter in his best blazer from Men's Warehouse. Harry's hand appeared on his shoulder, steering him toward a private dining room. Relax, my friend. You've earned your place at this table. The investors turned out to be three men who looked exactly like Eric expected wealthy investors to look: expensive suits, heavy watches, and that particular way of leaning back in their chairs that suggested they were used to people leaning toward them. Gentlemen, Harry announced, meet Eric Matthews, the mechanical genius I've been telling you about. 20 years of experience and a client list that reads like a who's who of our community. Eric felt his face flush at the introduction. He wasn't used to being sold like this, but he had to admit, Harry made his modest auto shop sound like a gold mine waiting to happen. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of perfectly cooked steaks, smooth scotch, and conversations that made Eric's head spin. The investors spoke about market penetration, luxury service sectors, and expansion potential. Harry smoothly translated their corporate jargon into terms that made Eric's heart race with possibility. We're talking about a complete transformation, Harry explained, sketching numbers on a napkin. State-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, a customer lounge that rivals a 5-star hotel, and a team of certified specialists. Your expertise combined with our capital, it's a perfect storm of opportunity. The numbers on the napkin made Eric's eyes widen. The projected revenue was more than he'd made in the past 5 years combined. Of course, one of the investors, Thompson, Eric couldn't remember, added, we'd need some skin in the game from you, Eric. Show your commitment to the vision. Harry jumped in smoothly. We're thinking a modest initial investment. Say, $250,000. Most of our partners leveraged their existing assets, home equity, retirement accounts. The returns make it more than worth it. Eric's mouth went dry. $250,000. It was almost everything he and Laura had saved over 25 years of marriage. The college fund for their kids, now grown. The retirement cushion they'd built dollar by dollar. Laura's warning echoed in his mind, but it was drowned out by Harry's next words, think about it, Eric. In 5 years, you could be running a chain of high-end service centers. No more crawling under cars yourself. No more worrying about making payroll. This is your chance to step into the big leagues. The drive home was a tornado of thoughts and emotions. Eric's hands gripped the steering wheel as he imagined telling Laura. She'd be furious, scared, maybe both. But wasn't this exactly what they'd always dreamed of? A chance to secure their future. The next morning, Eric called his bank. By afternoon, he had the paperwork ready to refinance their house and liquidate their investments. His hands shook as he signed the documents, but Harry's confidence was infectious. Trust me, Eric, Harry said as they finalized the partnership agreement a week later. This time next year, you'll look back on this as the best decision you ever made. For 3 weeks, everything seemed perfect. Construction crews began renovating the shop. New equipment arrived daily. Harry handled all the paperwork, explaining that his team of accountants would manage the financial side while Eric focused on operations. Then, on a Tuesday morning, Eric arrived at the shop to find the construction crews gone. The new equipment had vanished. And Harry? Harry was nowhere to be found. Panic rising, Eric called Harry's cell phone. Disconnected. He ran to Harry's house next door. Empty. A "for rent" sign stood in the yard, looking like it had been there for weeks. With trembling fingers, Eric called the bank. The partnership account had been drained. Every penny of his investment, gone. The world spun as Eric sank to his knees in his half-demolished shop. Tools scattered across the floor, dust coating everything, and a single thought hammering in his brain: Laura had been right all along. When he finally gathered the courage to call her, Laura's silence on the other end of the line was worse than any screaming could have been. "I'm coming home," he managed to say, his voice cracking. "No," Laura replied, her tone ice-cold. "Stay there. I'm coming to the shop. And I'm bringing boxes of your old files. Every receipt, every business card, every scrap of paper from the past year. If that snake left a trail, we're going to find it." As Eric waited for his wife, he noticed something stuck in the corner of his office door, a small business card he'd never seen before. On it, in elegant script, was a name: Margaret Wells, private investigator. And below that, a handwritten note: "When you're ready to know the truth about Harry Reynolds, call me." Eric stared at the card, a mixture of rage and hope building in his chest. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning of something else entirely, something called revenge. The private investigator's office smelled of stale coffee and old papers. Margaret Wells sat across from Eric and Laura, her steel-gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. She spread photographs across her desk like dealing cards in a game where everyone loses. "Harry Reynolds," she said, tapping one photo. "Or should I say Thomas Harrison? Or James Whitmore? Or any of his other half-dozen aliases over the past decade?" Eric leaned forward, studying the images. Each showed Harry with different hair colors, different styles, but always that same confident smile that had once seemed so trustworthy. "I've been tracking this man for 3 years," Margaret continued. "He's pulled the same scheme in at least 4 other states. Always targets successful small business owners, always plays the role of the sophisticated investor, and always disappears with everything they have." Laura's hand found Eric's under the table, squeezing tight. Her anger from the past week had mellowed into something more focused, more dangerous. "Why didn't the police catch him?" Eric asked, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. Margaret's laugh was bitter. "Because he's good. Really good. He works the gray areas of contract law. Gets his victims to sign perfectly legal documents. Makes them think they're investing in their own futures. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, he's gone, and the money's been moved through so many shell companies it's practically untraceable." Eric thought about his demolished shop, the missing equipment, the drained accounts. How does he choose his targets? Social media, usually. Business review sites. Local news coverage. Margaret pulled out another file. "He looks for established businesses with good reputations but room for growth. Places where the owner might be feeling stuck. Ready for a change." The words hit Eric like a physical blow. How many times had he complained on Facebook about wanting to expand? How many interviews had he given to local papers about his dreams for the shop? "But here's where it gets interesting," Margaret said, sliding forward a final photograph. This one showed Harry, or whatever his real name was, talking to a young woman outside a coffee shop. "Meet Rachel Chen. Former Mark, current girlfriend, and the only person who's ever gotten close to bringing him down." Laura leaned forward, her green eyes intense. "What happened?" 3 years ago, Rachel owned a successful bakery in Seattle. Harry pulled his usual routine: charming neighbor, business proposition, disappeared with her life savings. But Rachel was different. She didn't get mad, she got smart. Started tracking his patterns, following his digital footprint. She almost caught up to him in Chicago last year. Eric felt something stir in his chest, not just anger now, but purpose. Can you contact her? Margaret's smile was sharp. Already did. She's been waiting for my call. See, Rachel thinks she's figured out his pattern. The way he chooses his next target, how he moves the money, where he's likely to strike next. But she needs someone on the inside, someone he won't suspect. Someone like a broken-down mechanic who just lost everything? Eric asked bitterly. No, Margaret replied. Someone like a successful business owner who's about to make an amazing comeback. Someone whose recovery story will attract attention, and Harry's interest, in all the right ways. Laura straightened in her chair. You want to set a trap? Better, Margaret said. We want to beat him at his own game. But it's risky. You'll have to rebuild your business, Eric. Make it even more successful than before. Become exactly the kind of target he can't resist. Eric looked at the photos spread across the desk, all those different versions of Harry, all those ruined lives. How long? 6 months, minimum. We need to make your recovery look natural. Generate the right kind of publicity. Plant the bait and wait for him to bite. Laura's grip on Eric's hand tightened. What about our savings? Our home? Margaret's expression softened slightly. Rachel's got a plan for that too. See, Harry's not the only one who knows how to move money through shell companies. We've traced some of his accounts. With the right pressure, the right threats, let's just say he might find it in his best interest to make some anonymous restitution. Eric stood up, walking to the window. Outside, the city moved in its usual rhythms, oblivious to how lives could be shattered and rebuilt in the space of a few weeks. He thought about Harry's smooth words, his practiced smile, all the dreams he'd dangled like bait. If we do this, he said slowly, I want to know everything. Every detail of how he works. Every trick he uses. I want to understand him better than he understands himself. Margaret nodded, pulling out a thick file. Rachel's been documenting everything. His habits, his tells, even the way he takes his coffee. By the time we're done, you'll know him better than he knows himself. And then? Laura asked. Margaret's smile turned predatory. And then we take everything from him. Not just money, that's amateur hour. We take his confidence, his connections, his whole carefully constructed world. We make sure he never does this to anyone else again. As Eric drove home that night, Laura beside him in thoughtful silence, he realized something had changed. The rage that had been burning him up inside had cooled into something harder, more focused. Harry had taught him the price of trust, but now Eric would teach him something else. The cost of betrayal. His phone buzzed with a text from Margaret, Rachel's flight lands tomorrow morning. Time to start your education. Eric smiled for the first time in weeks. Harry had showed him how to lose everything. Rachel would show him how to take it all back, with interest. 6 months of preparation hadn't fully readied Eric for the moment Harry walked back into his shop. The renovated space gleamed with new equipment, purchased legitimately this time, with a small business loan Laura had helped him secure. The customer lounge really did rival a 5-star hotel, just as Harry had once promised. But this time, every inch of it was truly Eric's. Quite a comeback, Harry said, standing in the doorway like he'd never left. He looked thinner, his designer suit slightly less crisp, but that smile, that infuriating, confident smile, remained unchanged. Eric's hands trembled slightly as he wiped them on his shop rag, remembering Rachel's coaching. Let him think he still has power over you. Men like Harry feed on that. What are you doing here? Eric managed, his voice rough with genuine emotion. No acting needed there, the sight of Harry made his blood boil. Harry spread his hands in a gesture of supplication. I came to explain. To make things right. He glanced around the shop, noting the high-end vehicles in various stages of repair. Though it seems you've done pretty well without me. Eric remembered Margaret's words, he'll try to minimize what he did. Make it seem like you're better off for having been betrayed. The prediction proved eerily accurate. Make things right. Eric's laugh held no humor. You disappeared with my life savings. Left me with a half-demolished shop and a mountain of debt. Harry stepped closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. I had no choice, Eric. There were people after me, dangerous people. I had to go underground to protect everyone involved, including you. The explanation was so smooth, so practiced, that Eric might have believed it 6 months ago. But now he could see the subtle tells Rachel had taught him to recognize, the slight tightening around Harry's eyes, the way his left hand stayed in his pocket, likely gripping his car keys, his unconscious preparation for a quick exit. I've spent the last 6 months putting my life back together, Eric said, allowing some of his real bitterness to show. Laura nearly left me. My reputation in this town was almost destroyed. And yet look at this place now, Harry gestured expansively. You've done amazing things here, Eric. Better than anything I could have helped you achieve. Sometimes life's greatest opportunities come disguised as disasters. Eric turned away, ostensibly to check a diagnostic readout but actually to hide his expression. Through his earpiece, so tiny it was nearly invisible, he could hear Rachel's voice, he's testing the waters. Seeing if you're vulnerable enough to be played again. I did do well, Eric agreed, turning back to face his former friend. Had to mortgage everything I owned to do it, but the business is stronger than ever. Harry's eyes lit up with poorly concealed interest. Right on cue, as Rachel had predicted. The bigger the comeback, the more tempting the target. You know, Harry said carefully, I might be able to help make things up to you. I have some new connections, legitimate ones this time. Investors who'd be very interested in a success story like yours. Eric felt Laura's presence before he saw her, his wife emerging from the office with deadly grace. She'd known Harry would return today, they'd planned for it meticulously, but seeing her face to face with the man who'd nearly destroyed their lives still made Eric's heart race. Well, look who's back from the dead, Laura said, her voice dripping with venom. Harry's composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of genuine fear crossing his face. Laura. You're looking well. Wish I could say the same. She moved to stand beside Eric, her shoulder touching his in a show of unity. You've got some nerve showing up here. I was just telling Eric about some investment opportunities, Harry said, recovering quickly. A chance to make things right. Laura's laugh was cold enough to freeze hell. You mean like last time? When you made things so right that we almost lost everything? That was a misunderstanding dash. Save it, Laura cut him off. Eric, honey, the police detective is waiting in your office. Should I tell him you'll be a few minutes? Harry's face paled slightly. Police detective? Eric waved his hand dismissively. Just routine stuff about a break-in last month. Nothing major. He watched Harry's expression carefully, noting the slight relaxation of his shoulders. Unless you think there's something else I should tell him about. No, Harry said quickly. Actually, I should go. But Eric. He pulled out a business card, setting it on a nearby workbench. Think about what I said. Everyone deserves a second chance, right? As Harry's footsteps faded, Laura turned to Eric. He bought it. Eric nodded, picking up the business card. Through his earpiece, Rachel's voice was triumphant, hook, line, and sinker. He'll be checking your financial records within the hour. Everything we planted will look perfect, just tempting enough to draw him in. Laura's hand found Eric's, squeezing gently. Are you okay? Eric stared at the business card, at the new company name and phone number Harry was using. You know what's strange? Part of me wanted to believe him. Even after everything, some small part of me wanted to think there was a real explanation. That's what makes you different from him, Laura said softly. You still want to see the good in people. He just sees opportunities to exploit. Through the earpiece, Margaret's voice joined Rachel's. My contact at the SEC just confirmed, he's already making moves to establish new shell companies. Same pattern as before. Eric crushed the business card in his fist. How long do we wait? Give him a week, Rachel advised. Let him think he's grooming you. Then we move to phase 2. Laura picked up her phone, scrolling through their carefully curated social media posts, all designed to make their financial recovery look just a little too good to be true. Should I post about the expansion plans? Do it, Rachel confirmed. Make sure to mention the investor meeting next Thursday. Let's give Harry something to think about. As Laura headed back to the office, Eric stood in his rebuilt shop, surrounded by the fruits of honest labor and the foundation of elaborate deception. The truth was, Harry had taught him well, just not the lessons he'd intended. In 1 week, Harry would learn his own lesson: never con a man who has nothing left to lose, and everything to gain from revenge. The conference room at the Marriott buzzed with anticipation. Eric sat at the head of the table, watching Harry work the room with practiced charm. Everything was proceeding exactly as Rachel had predicted, the same investors from before, the same smooth pitch, even the same brand of scotch being poured. But this time, Eric knew what to look for. He noticed how Thompson never actually drank his scotch, how Harrison checked his phone at precisely timed intervals, how the third investor, Williams, kept touching his wedding ring whenever he quoted numbers. All tells that Rachel had taught him to recognize. They weren't real investors at all, but rather members of Harry's network of confidence men. The realization should have made Eric angry, but instead, it filled him with cold satisfaction. Every fake smile, every rehearsed line of their pitch just added more evidence to the file Margaret was building. The numbers speak for themselves, Harry was saying, projecting spreadsheets onto the wall. Eric's business has shown remarkable growth. With our investment strategy, we could replicate this success across multiple locations. Eric nodded, playing his role perfectly. The market's ready. I've got customers driving from 3 states away for our specialized services. Through his earpiece, Rachel's voice was calm and focused. The SEC team is in position. Every transaction they propose is being monitored in real time. Laura sat beside Eric, her tablet open to a series of complex financial documents, all carefully crafted by Margaret's team to appear legitimate while containing subtle red flags that would catch any serious investigator's attention. We're thinking bigger than last time, Harry continued, his confidence growing with every nod of agreement. National expansion. Premium service centers in every major market. But we'll need significant capital to make it happen. Thompson leaned forward, right on cue. We're prepared to offer primary financing, but as discussed before, we'd need you to demonstrate your commitment, Eric. Say, $500,000 this time. Show us you're serious about scaling up. Eric felt Laura tense beside him but kept his expression neutral. That's a lot of capital. I'd have to leverage everything I've rebuilt. Fortune favors the bold, Harry said, clapping him on the shoulder. Remember what I told you about, well enough, being the enemy of exceptional? The same words, the same gesture, it was like watching a replay of his own downfall. But this time, Eric was the one in control. I've prepared some preliminary paperwork, Harry continued, sliding a folder across the table. Standard investment agreement, very straightforward. Eric opened the folder, pretending to review documents he'd already memorized. Through his earpiece, Margaret's voice was sharp, perfect. The routing numbers match our traced accounts. We've got him. Before we proceed, Laura interjected smoothly, I'd like our financial advisor to review these. Just a formality, you understand. Harry's smile flickered for just a moment. Of course. Though time is of the essence. We have other potential partners waiting. Speaking of partners, Eric said carefully, I'd love to hear more about your previous investment successes. The ones in Seattle, Chicago, Boston. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Harry's hand twitched toward his pocket, toward his keys, but he caught himself. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said, his voice perfectly controlled. "Our investment group is relatively new." Eric pulled out his phone, pulling up a series of news articles, each one carefully planted by Margaret's team over the past month. Interesting reading here. About businesses that received similar investment offers. About owners who lost everything. Those situations were completely different, Harry started, but Eric wasn't finished. "But the most interesting article," he continued, "is the one that hasn't been published yet. The one detailing how a sophisticated investment fraud operation targets successful small businesses. The one naming names, tracking money, exposing everything." The other investors were exchanging glances now, subtle signals passing between them. Through his earpiece, Rachel reported movement in the hotel lobby, Harry's escape plan kicking into gear. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Harry said, standing slowly, "but I think we should take some time to dash." "Sit down, Harry," Laura commanded, her voice like steel. "Or should we call you Thomas? Or James? Which name is on your current passport?" The door opened, and Margaret Wells stepped in, followed by two SEC agents and Rachel Chen, whose face Harry clearly recognized judging by his sudden pallor. "Hello, Harry," Rachel said softly. "Remember me?" Eric stood, buttoning his jacket with steady hands. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign some papers, real ones this time. Confessing everything. Naming your accomplices. Returning every penny you've stolen." "And why would I do that?" Harry asked, though his voice had lost its smooth confidence. "Because if you don't," Margaret said, "every scrap of evidence we've gathered goes public. Every victim, every scheme, every identity you've used. Your whole network exposed. And trust me, some of your former partners won't be happy about that." Harry's eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. "You can't prove anything." Eric smiled, and for the first time, he saw real fear in Harry's eyes. "Check your phone, Harry. Check the news. Check your accounts. While you were here playing your games, we were dismantling your entire operation. Piece by piece." Laura stood, opening her tablet to reveal a cascade of frozen accounts, traced transactions, and documented frauds. "You taught us well, Harry. About leverage. About making things look legitimate on paper. About how to move money without leaving traces. We've been very good students." The SEC agents moved forward as Harry sank back into his chair, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. But Eric wasn't finished, not yet. He had one final card to play, one last lesson to teach about the true price of betrayal. 1 year later, Eric stood in his expanded shop, watching the morning sun glint off the polished hoods of luxury cars. The wall of his office displayed 2 framed newspaper articles, one announcing Harry Reynolds' conviction for multiple counts of investment fraud, the other celebrating Matthews Auto Services' expansion to 3 locations across the state. "Still admiring your trophies?" Laura asked, wrapping her arms around him from behind. Her touch carried the same warmth it had for 26 years, but there was new strength in it now, the kind that comes from weathering storms together. "Just thinking," Eric replied, turning to face his wife. "About how different things might have been if you hadn't been suspicious of Harry from the start." Laura smiled, the morning light catching the silver strands in her hair. "That's what marriage is supposed to be, watching each other's backs. Though I have to admit, I never imagined we'd end up taking down a criminal enterprise together." The shop was quiet this early, but Eric could hear his new apprentices arriving, young mechanics he'd hired from the local technical college. After everything that happened with Harry, he'd made it his mission to mentor the next generation properly, teaching them not just about cars but about business ethics and the true meaning of trust. His phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, "Turn on the news." Another one of Harry's old partners just got arrested in Miami. The dominoes keep falling. The investigation they'd started had expanded far beyond Harry himself, exposing a network of fraud that stretched across the country. Margaret's evidence had led to dozens of arrests, millions in recovered funds, and a fundamental change in how investment fraud was investigated. Mr. Matthews. One of his new mechanics, Sarah, appeared in the doorway. That Ferrari we've been waiting for just arrived. Want to show me how to run the new diagnostic system? Eric smiled, remembering his own early days in the business. Be right there. He turned back to Laura. Dinner at 7. I promised Margaret and Rachel I'd update them on the restitution program. The program had been Eric's idea, using recovered funds to help Harry's other victims rebuild their businesses. It wasn't just about getting justice anymore, it was about turning something broken into something better. As Laura left for her own office, she'd taken over the financial side of the business, proving to have a natural talent for it. Eric's phone rang. The caller ID showed a restricted number. Hello. Eric. Harry's voice was thin, prison phone lines never being the best quality. I've been doing a lot of thinking. Eric waited, letting the silence stretch. He'd learned that silence could be more powerful than words. I wanted to say. Harry paused, and for once, the smoothness was gone from his voice. You could have taken everything from me. Exposed everyone. But you gave my partners a chance to come clean, to make restitution. Why? Because this was never about revenge, Harry. Not really. Eric watched Sarah preparing the Ferrari for inspection, her movements careful and precise. It was about fixing what was broken. Including people. The prosecutors are offering a deal, Harry said quietly. If I help them uncover other operations like mine. I thought you should know I'm taking it. Good. Eric meant it. Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild, Harry. Even you. After hanging up, Eric walked through his shop, taking in the sounds that had become so familiar over the years, tools clinking, engines purring, the quiet conversation of mechanics solving problems together. The shop had changed, grown larger and more sophisticated, but its heart remained the same, honest work, done well, by people who cared about doing it right. Laura appeared at his side again, holding 2 cups of coffee. You okay? Better than okay, Eric replied, taking his cup, black, 2 sugars, some things never changed. Just realizing something. Harry thought he was teaching me about business, about success. But what he really taught me was the value of what I already had. And what's that? Eric looked at his wife, then around at the business they'd built together, twice now. That true success isn't about fancy investments or rapid expansion. It's about building something real. Something that lasts. A customer walked in, one of their regulars, trusted for years. Eric stepped forward to greet him, but not before squeezing Laura's hand one more time. The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air and making them dance like tiny stars. In the back, Sarah was already setting up the diagnostic equipment, her movements confident and sure. The shop hummed with the sound of honest work and new beginnings. Eric smiled, knowing that while Harry had taught him the price of trust, life had taught him something far more valuable, that some things, once broken and carefully rebuilt, emerged stronger than ever before. His shop was proof of that. His marriage was proof of that. And somewhere out there, other small business owners were sleeping easier, knowing that one more predator had been removed from their midst. Not by violence or pure revenge, but by people choosing to stand together, to protect what mattered, to rebuild what was broken. That, Eric realized, was the greatest revenge of all, not the destruction of an enemy, but the creation of something better from the ashes of betrayal. The day was beginning, and there was work to be done. Good, honest work. The kind that built legacies not of wealth or power, but of trust restored and wisdom shared. Eric picked up his tools and got started.